Hey, it's Carrie.
And Ashley.
We welcome you to the Self-Care Cafe. We are both health professionals and moms and nature lovers and food lovers and love helping women get over dieting and just start living. We think that talking about bodies and perfect bodies and dieting is just boring.
Did we put you to sleep there, Carrie?
Yes. So if you are ready to ditch dieting and get to living and talk about more important things, then you are in the right place. We don't put shame and guilt on the menu here. You don't even have to tip us.
Nope.
Come hang with us. The advice is free. We want to have a bunch of girlfriends to just hang out with and get real with, and it's time to start living, ladies. Hey, Ashley.
Hey, Carrie.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. What is on our menu for today?
So we're continuing with our series. So it's going to be a long, it's a long haul we have for you all. But I feel
Now,
like,
don't make it sound so arduous.
no, I know, but I was just going to say, I feel like if you stick with it, though, it's so much good information and so much good stuff to think about. It's just a lot of information. So it's fun.
Yeah, overlap. So repetition is always good. We're trying to learn something new and trying to change your mindset of being. So, and we might say something one way one week and another way another week, and the light bulb might go off. It's like, oh, that's what they're talking about.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Right. So this is it's all good. So like you said, stick with it. Even if like I know this stuff already.
But even if you know it, you might not be practicing it or yeah.
Mhm.
And I tell this to my clients a lot too. Like I feel like we're the only place, or there's maybe a very small corner of the internet or social media or any of the stuff you're paying attention to that talks about what we talk about. And so the more we can keep it in front of you, the more seeds that are planted and the more used to thinking this way you'll become, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. It's just that constant, right? Because that's what makes our habits.
Right, exactly. Like we talk about all the time. See, it all makes sense.
We're going to show up in your dreams.
Goodness. So today's topic, we're still in the breaking up with dieting phase of the intuitive eating
A long breakup.
This one is, I feel like this one is the hardest part of intuitive eating, and that is why it's so long, because this part of intuitive eating is a lot of unlearning the stuff that we've been collecting in our brains for however old we are. And at the same time, if we're unlearning it, then it's like, well, how do we deal with this now? And so we're unlearning and sort of trying to learn a new process or belief or whatever it might be. And so this part is very tricky, and it's really challenging some really big beliefs that a lot of us have around food, weight, nutrition, bodies, health, all of it. So again, that is why it's so much information, but I'm trying to make it fun for you all. So today's principle is intuitive eating principle number 3, which is make peace with food. And this one, I feel like a lot of people struggle with the idea of, because it's like, well, I hate food, or I only eat because I have to, or if I could take, a pill that gave me all of my nutrition, I would. I hear that from my clients a lot.
Yeah.
Or just tell me what to eat. Carrie and I hear that a lot.
Or nowadays, I just want to take a shot. So I don't, crave or don't eat as much or whatever it is.
Right.
And we're always, it's human nature to look for that quick fix and to the shortcut and make it easy. I don't want to have to think about it, but we all have to eat to live. So
Right.
why not figure it out now so that when you are, in the last chapter of your life, that you're enjoying it instead of, because we both seen people much older that still struggle with all of this stuff, and
Mhm.
it's heartbreaking to see that that is like always so, front of mind, front and center in front of them. It's all they think about, and they make choices based on, choice activity choices or relationship choices, what they do around food and what and eating and stuff. So,
Yeah. We want
so
better for you when you're getting older with us.
yeah, let's grow old together
That's right.
and let's make peace with food.
Yes. Yeah, so back on today's topic a little bit more. So what the heck does that even mean?
What does it mean, Ash?
I feel like it's sort of examining how we think about food and how we deal with food, so our behaviors, and doing it in a way that is nourishing to your body. And this is what we talk about all of the time. I tend to not always use these terms though, because it does sound so out there for a lot of people. Um, but yeah, it's kind of getting your relationship with food in a better place, I feel like. And a lot of people might not think about, hey, I have a relationship with food, but we
Right.
definitely do.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like the culmination of how you think about it or how you eat food or how you make choices around food. All of those things are part of your relationship with food.
Yeah, and through
um,
the years, I know a lot of people. I've had clients like they want to make peace with food. They just don't know how. They
right.
don't know where to begin. And hopefully we give you a little pathway
Yes.
to start doing that today.
Yes. Because food's not the enemy, even though our culture really kind of makes it out to be that way.
Right.
Food can be fun. Food is tasty. Food gives us a lot of memories. A lot of our um, social events are kind of centered around food, which can be helpful or cannot be helpful depending on where you're at.
Mhm.
So yeah, we're going to give you some information and some advice today. You can take it,
So
you can leave it.
what it would be the first thing that you would tell someone, Ashley, who's struggling with this whole thing, food, they hate food, I mean, they love food. They have a love-hate relationship with food, right?
Yes, I hear that a lot too. I think the very first step to this making peace with food is giving yourself permission to eat. And not just permission, but like unconditional permission. And that sounds so scary.
What does
And
that
what
mean?
yeah, what does that mean? That means eating without food rules, eating kind of what sounds good to you instead of what you think you should be eating. Um, it's not really giving yourself the opportunity to think of some foods as like forbidden foods, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, but it also does not mean that you can eat anything however much you want, whenever you want. I think that's another like big misconception about intuitive eating. It's kind of like just eat everything all the time, but it's a little different than that. We take into account more of like, what do you actually want to eat? What actually is filling you up? What's keeping you more satisfied? What makes your body feel good? Um, things like that. Does that make sense, Carrie?
Yeah, because I think, like you said, as soon as someone starts talking about intuitive eating and these principles, what a lot of people automatically go to is that, oh, I mean, I can eat whatever I want anytime I want, as much as I want, and that's not what it's about
Right.
either. So I think some of it is in our own faults too, with the way that we word things sometimes, that people we professionals need to be more careful with how we say things sometimes so that people don't get the wrong impression about it. So yeah, and you'll hear us say this several times, not
Right.
just today, but that is not what this means.
Right.
Like, giving yourself permission to eat means you you are giving yourself permission to eat, like especially the foods that you're forbidding yourself to eat or restricting, allowing yourself to have that food, and maybe it's just a bite or two of it, at first, whatever. Um, And maybe that's all you need to feel satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't
Yeah,
mean eating an entire pizza.
right. And I think it's hard too because a lot of us are very all or nothing thinkers.
Yeah.
And so if we are dieting or restricting, and then we decide not to do that anymore because we're sick of it or whatever's happening, we tend to go to the other side, which is sort of eating all of the food, especially the foods we might think of as forbidden foods or maybe bad foods. Um, we tend to go to that side of things. And again, that's not what intuitive eating is. Intuitive eating is finding that middle ground. You hear it probably us say that all the time, but
Yeah, and
that's really what it is.
if you're an all or nothing thinker, you typically live at one end of the spectrum
Mm-hmm.
or the other, right? The pendulum swings one end and then it swings to the other end.
Right.
And it's finding that sweet spot somewhere in the middle that fits you, and allows you freedom in this area. I think that's that freedom piece is huge. But that doesn't mean that there are no boundaries at all,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
even in a free country, there's still boundaries.
Right.
Can't just go around and do whatever you want, right?
Right.
Like, so it's that, think of freedom, food freedom in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Or Carrie, I really like your horse example.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Okay, so the horse example is, let's say you have a horse, and let's say you tie that horse to a short rope, and that's how this horse lives, right? It's restricted. It can only graze on the grass, right? And it's immediate, however long that rope allows it to go out. So let's say another horse is allowed to roam freely around the neighborhood. There's no fence, there's no rope, there's nothing. It just goes wherever it wants to go, right? Like, what's going to happen to that horse? Yeah. So, and then let's say you have another horse who she's not tied up, but she has a sizable pasture, but it's enclosed in a fence,
Mhm.
right? So that last scenario where you have this sizable pasture, but there's a boundary to it, there's a fence to it, so that you can't just go wherever you want to go
Mhm.
and roam the neighborhood at
Right.
whenever you want, for as long as you want. And right.
Right.
So
And
yeah.
she has like learned these boundaries and created them herself. Not that a horse could do that, but that's
Right.
sort of the piece.
But some animals do, right? Like,
Yeah.
even if they get out,
Hmm.
they know how to get back home.
Right. And
So,
I was just going to say that, like, sometimes it is jumping the boundaries and
mhm,
testing them out and figuring out, like, oh, this was here for a reason. And yes, I want to keep that. Or actually, let's expand this part of the boundary or whatever because this worked out for me better. Like, it's all about always sort of evaluating and adjusting. There's
right.
like the
Like,
fence moves.
maybe your horse bought the pasture next door,
Right.
and the fence gets expanded, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, I love that.
for sure. Yeah. And I think too, like, part of it is it's really hard to think about this, but I really encourage everyone to think about like an all foods fit approach to food. And this is exactly what we were just talking about, like having some boundaries around what makes you feel better or worse, and you could still eat them. That's totally up to you. Um, and looking at your patterns overall. And remember, not one food is going to make or break your health or nutrition unless you're allergic to it. Don't do that. Um,
Yeah, don't test those
don't do
boundaries.
that. But it's all about our patterns. We talk about this all the time too. Like, if you're generally eating food that makes your body feel good and you enjoy it most of the time, it's fine to eat foods that you're really excited about that maybe don't make you feel great, but once in a while taste really good. Like, and going into it with I can have this and this might happen to me, but I'm going to do it anyways kind of idea puts us back in that driver's seat.
Exactly. It's very intentional. So, like,
Yes.
I know certain foods that just do not agree with me. And I
Mhm.
know if I eat them, I most likely will pay later. Um, but I sometimes knowingly I'm like, I'll just have my Fazyme ready to pop, you
Yep.
know, for the gas and the bloating or whatever, or be near a toilet later,
Yep.
if I know. Um, and sometimes it's not worth it, and you choose not to have it.
Right.
And also like when we say like, foods that you want to eat. Some people, a lot of times you want to eat healthy foods too. We're not,
Right.
that doesn't include just those, the play foods that we talk about and things like that, and the foods that you restrict. Like some people genuinely, like I genuinely, like sometimes I crave a salad. I just want that crispy, right? That freshness
Yeah.
and stuff.
I actually
So,
put a salad on my menu this week because I was like, oh, I need something fresh and I'm gonna make like a orange vinaigrette for something bright and
mhm,
zingy.
yeah, because
I
it's
just
spring,
really am feeling
summery.
that this week.
We're sick of winter.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So when we say that, it doesn't necessarily mean just those play foods or the foods that you've been restricting or anything.
Mhm.
Like all foods fit, and like except unless you're, allergic or highly sensitive or
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but did you want to talk about that? There's a pizza study.
Yeah, so part of this unconditional permission to eat and how it relates to dieting is dieting kind of keeps foods exciting, right? That forbidden fruit. And so it makes it kind of scary to us to eat them.
Yeah.
But what research shows us is that the more we eat a food or a category of foods, the less exciting it becomes to us. And so there's this study out there, I call it the pizza study. And they took a bunch of college kids and they gave them free pizza for dinner every night for an entire month.
Woohoo!
Right? Like that sounds like the lottery. Yes, please sign me
Mhm.
up. But what they found was, yeah, it was really exciting at the beginning. People were loving it. And then at the end of the study, what do you think happened? People were so sick of it. They're like, I never want to eat pizza again. And I experience this all the time. Like, I definitely go through phases, and I think a lot of other people do too. And there's a reason for it. Kids do this, right? Oh my gosh. When my
Mm.
daughter is really excited about a food, I stock up on it. And then after I do that, she's done with it.
Yes,
Right?
yes. How many
And
times have you done that, parents? Oh my
yes,
gosh.
so many. And there's a reason for it. The point is, our body realizes, oh, hey, we're getting a lot of the same nutrition from this particular food. So let's crave or think of a different food so that we can get different nutrition from it. Again, it's all about those patterns. We've stocked up on all the nutrition from this
Yeah,
pizza. So let's move on to something else.
right.
And that's all normal. Like, I feel like um we get freaked out when we're eating quote unquote healthy foods. Like this is a personal example. I used to like broccoli and I would eat it not every day or anything, but regularly in our menus. And then broccoli was the only vegetable my daughter would eat for a long time. So we had broccoli a lot more. And I still to this day do not really enjoy broccoli that much anymore. And
Mhm.
so it's all about that, like, how are we dealing with this food? Are we allowing ourselves to eat it? Are we keeping it as this forbidden fruit? Are we eating it all the time so we get sick of it? I feel like I see this a lot with my clients that diet a lot. Fruit and vegetables kind of become these like boring foods because that's all they're quote unquote allowed to eat on these diet plans. And they almost become like resentful of them. They're like, I'm so sick of these foods. They're not exciting. It's kind of the opposite almost as like the fun foods that we're talking about.
Right, right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's super scary to like allow ourselves to have foods that maybe we've been restricting for a long time because we
Mm.
don't really know what's going to happen. Because maybe in the past we've done that and it hasn't ended well. Maybe we ate so much we didn't feel good, or we had that like out of control feeling. So we didn't trust ourselves around that food anymore.
Mm. Yeah, that trust takes time to build
Yes.
up too. Just like, when you're in a new relationship, it takes time to build that trust, and especially if you've been burned in the past, right? So you're going to be going to it with some hesitation and maybe some walls up and things like that. And it's really kind of the same with food too. So if you don't trust yourself around food, when you're told, well, you can eat that if you want it, and you haven't trusted yourself, maybe it's something that it's something that you keep restricting, because every time you eat it, feel like you eat too much of it.
Mhm.
But the thing is, the crazy in your brain, what's really could be going on is like you eat more of it because you do restrict it
Right.
and you haven't allowed yourself to have that food. Um, so it's like the students, like with the pizza, at first you get to eat it, and then you're sick of it. But you can eat it, but now you
Right.
don't really care.
Want it, right?
Right.
Think about your most forbidden food in your brain. And if me and Carrie, like force fed you it for weeks, would you get
But
sick of
wide.
it? Right? Like, I feel like yes. And I feel like we all don't think of those quote unquote bad foods or forbidden foods in that way. Like, there's foods in our regular menus that we know that happens with, but we couldn't possibly feel that way about, I don't know, like chocolate cake is one of my favorite examples, but that's because we typically restrict it. And so when we do have it, or maybe it's only at special occasions or whatever, we do tend to eat more of it. And you know what? That's okay too, right? Like Carrie with
Mhm.
your Christmas cookies that we talk about a
Mhm.
lot on this podcast.
I know.
Somehow this has become one of our favorite
Hey, Graham.
examples. But or other things like the holiday type foods, right? Or seasonal foods. We do tend to eat maybe quote unquote too much of them.
Mhm.
But in reality, is it too much? Well, if you get a bellyache and you don't feel good, maybe, but
Or your joints swell up.
right, like,
Like,
but we just talked about like it's
yeah,
your choice to decide that
exactly.
instead of feeling like you're like the victim to it almost, I guess. Like forbidden foods
Yeah,
keep the yeah,
you're a slave to it. You're allowing it to control you
yeah, the
instead
food
of
has
you
the power
controlling
in
it.
that
Yeah,
scenario. And so
right,
when we say, instead of asking yourself, what should I eat? Or, oh, I could never eat that because XYZ reason, ask yourself, what do I want to eat? And do I want to eat this particular food right now? Like give yourself that power back.
right. And there have been studies that have shown too that when you are told, whether from someone else or yourself, I can't eat that, what is your brain's like, oh, come on.
Right. When
Yes,
you
you
tell
do.
someone you
You
can't do
want that.
something, yeah.
Remember the M&M study with the
Mhm.
kids, right? They
Yep.
they took these kids and they put them in a room. They had all of these M&Ms, and they were told you could have as many M&Ms as you want. Just do not eat the red ones. What did they eat?
The red ones.
Yeah, yeah, because we kind of go into this rebellion. It's like, well, why can't I have the red ones? What's wrong with the red? What's so special with them? And
Right.
like we want what we are told we're not supposed to have. That's just normal human nature. It doesn't make
Right.
you weak or no willpower or anything like that. That's just how our brains work.
Yeah.
And so yeah. So when you're telling yourself you can't have a certain food, then it's like that's all you can think about.
Right. It's kind of like Last Supper eating too. So if you've
Mm,
ever planned to go on a diet tomorrow or in the next week or whatever, you might tend to eat a lot of the foods that aren't allowed on that diet, leading up to it because you know it's going to be restricted. Or
no,
like even just the idea that something might be restricted causes this effect too. So even though you might not be consciously thinking of it, it's kind of laying low in your brain, causing you to maybe think a little differently about your food choices.
right. Because how often, like, you're in your head, the little voice is saying you shouldn't be eating that. You really
Right.
shouldn't. And you're saying, shut up, I'm just going to eat all of it so it's gone.
Hmm.
Right.
Yep.
And then even if it's not like a formal diet, like Ashley said, but it's that box, the Girl Scout cookies. Right?
Hmm.
Girl Scout cookie season right now when we're recording this. So maybe you got those Girl Scout cookies and you're like, "Ugh." Instead of like put them in the freezer and just, having a couple or a few, whatever, when you feel like it, you're like, I'm just gonna eat them all so they're gone. Then they're not a temptation, right? That
Right.
temptation. But that's like we said, that's allowing the food to have power over you instead of you controlling and saying, hey, I'm in charge and I can have that if I want it. Do I want it? Like it's like being very intentional with it. Say it out loud. I really let's see, I'm hungry right now. What are my choices? Okay. And ABC. Well, what do I feel like having? Right. And then you
Yeah.
could also think, well, what have I had to eat so far today? And, well, I haven't had, maybe it's, dinner time and I haven't have any fruits and vegetables. Well, this sounds good for a fruit and vegetable. You know what I'm saying? Like it's being kind of logical with it as well. It doesn't have to be every day. Like maybe, but if you've got enough fruits and vegetables, grandpa's probably trying to throw some in there, right?
Right. But to be honest, do we all eat fruits and vegetables every single day? Maybe, maybe not. Like, again, it's about those patterns. And yes, research shows us that it's good, quote unquote, to eat fruits and vegetables every day, but it doesn't happen for everybody. And we don't have to feel any which way necessarily about it. Like, do we want to feel better and have more energy? Well, try adding more fruits and veggies then. And you don't have to go from none to 50 a day. Like that's unreasonable, or even 5. It's all about like asking yourself those questions like Carrie was just saying, when it's time to decide, hey, I need to eat something. These are my choices. What do I feel like? What is my experience with this food in the past? Do I want to choose that now? How hungry am I? Do I need a bigger volume, or a smaller volume? Like, there's lots of questions to be asked.
Right. And if well, I can really, I kind of, I want to eat the ice cream, but I feel like I know that that's not going to sustain me very long. So instead, I'm going to eat, a sandwich first, and then I'll see if I still want the ice cream.
Right.
And so it's that constant, like, what does your body need also? And what activities are you doing after?
Yep.
If know that it's gonna be a while before you eat again, well, a scoop or two of ice cream, it's not going to cut it. It's not going to last very long. So having something more sustainable first, and then,
Right. That's kind of
it's
like
just
that practical hunger that we talked about last week or last
right,
time.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the food loses its power over you. It's like, yeah, I could eat you right now if I wanted to. Let's say you're talking to a food that you restrict. Talk to your food. It's like, yep, I see you. And yep, I could eat you right now if I wanted to, but I don't really feel like it, right? Like getting to that point where it's like not feeling this urgency, um, this food frenzy to
Hmm.
have to eat that because, and maybe you want to eat it, maybe you're home alone and I'm going to eat it now before anyone else gets home and gets it, or before they see me eat it, or tell me I can't eat it, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I see you. I could have you if I wanted to, but I'm going to choose something more nourishing right now, and I'll come back to you.
Yeah. And another thing I was just thinking about too was sometimes when we eat these foods, they aren't even as good as we've like created
Hmm,
in our brain. Like, I don't know. It's so interesting when people try some of these foods again for the first time and they're like, oh, well, it wasn't even that good.
right, right.
Or like it didn't taste the way I remembered it, or whatever. And then it's like, oh, this really isn't as exciting as I thought it was. And some of it is, like, some of it does taste as good.
Mhm, mhm. And some of the times it's the first few bites that taste great, and then it's like, oh, now I'm just going to eat you because you're there,
Right.
right? So it's it sounds time consuming, and it is a little bit at first when you realize that you can't, it's like a new way of thinking and talking to yourself and to food and stuff. Over time, though, it gets a lot easier and it just becomes more, automatic.
Right.
But yeah, you have to put the time in initially. Sorry.
But it is so worth it. It's so worth
Yeah,
it.
that it is. So does this bring us down to how to?
Yeah, I think so.
Perfect. All right, Ashley.
How to
How
do it.
how the heck do you do this?
Yeah, so I think one of the first steps is getting to know your hunger and
Getting to
figuring
know.
all that out, like we talked about the last time.
Mhm.
Because if you're still figuring that out and also trying to figure out what to eat, that is tricky. Like, figure out when you're hungry first, or like what type of hunger or whatever. Because if you tend to wait too long to eat and you get over hungry, there's no way that we can make informed choices, I guess, on what our food is, because our little survival brain kicks in and says, you just need to eat and eat
Now.
whatever's here. Right.
Right.
So if we're getting a handle on our hunger and fueling ourselves consistently, then we're able to make the choices we are trying to make.
Yeah, rational choices. If you're in that
Exactly.
hangry phase,
Mhm.
there's no rationality with that.
Right.
Like you just need something quick. Like if your blood sugar is really low,
Yeah.
and if you're to the point where you're kind of shaky and irritable, you're going to eat whatever's easily and readily available first.
Yeah. And
So,
that's not to say that that's not part of quote unquote normal eating. Like, that happens to most of us here and there, and that's okay. It's not like we need to beat ourselves up about it. It's just what happened today, and let's figure out maybe why, or maybe we know why and it couldn't be avoided. Like, we don't have to feel bad about not listening to our hunger once in a while. But if we have a handle on our patterns and we have a loose, flexible plan on how to nourish our bodies, it still happens sometimes, happens to me sometimes too. Um, it's part of normal eating.
right. It's when it's happening all the time,
All the time.
like consistently. And then other people are having to deal with your moods,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah,
like I'm sure we've all been around people like that. And maybe you're one of those people,
right,
that because it does affect your mood and you get irritable and, it's like, toss me a bone, like, you know,
right.
so yeah, it's like about, like Ashley said, those patterns. So if you're constantly getting hangry, like every day you're getting to the hangry point, well, that needs to be addressed,
Yeah,
and maybe you need to eat more consistently.
right. And when we are getting that hungry, we tend to do what we were talking about earlier, which is called like rebound eating. If we're not eating enough, then our body's going to make us eat, right?
Mhm.
And so then we might not feel good about that feeling, because it does feel rushed. It does feel frenzied. It does feel like I'm not making the choices I typically want to make, those rational choices,
Mhm.
because of that survival mechanism, like just telling you to eat something.
Right. And it's usually not, carrots and so,
No,
uh,
definitely not.
it's usually something, something high in sugar because that's quick energy.
Mhm.
And that's what our brain's telling us it needs.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So you're less likely to make more nourishing choices too.
Yes. Yeah. So honoring your hunger is probably one of the first steps. And
Yeah. So
again, we have a whole episode.
was that the last podcast,
Yep,
Ashley?
episode number 27, I think it was.
Okay. So
What's
go back
next?
to that if you need to just
Yep,
to learn more about that again.
yep. And then the next piece is like being careful of that whole I can eat however much I want whenever I want part. And it might happen a little bit when you're first practicing this, because again, going from all or nothing mindset,
That pendulum swing.
yep, it just might. Oops. Um, so being aware of that and being okay with it for a little bit, but figuring it out, like not hanging out in that spot.
Right. Right. Like where is your freedom happy place? Like
Right.
where you're not tied so tight, like that's what the diet is. You're tied to a short rope versus, or that the other end, I could eat whatever I want anytime I want, as much as I want. Right. And that's that no boundary at all.
Yes.
So
And
find
again,
your pasture.
yeah. And again, you might experience that, because if you're undernourishing and then you go to nourish your body more completely, sometimes it is tricky to navigate your food choices. So try to be flexible with yourself, give yourself some self-compassion, and then sort of feel out, oh, this is too much. My belly hurts from eating so much, or these aren't the choices I want to be making all of the time, and figure that part out.
Right.
And then I guess the last one, which is really interesting, is lists.
Take
So
a look.
make a list, and the list is going to include foods that are really appealing to you. So, like some of your favorite foods, foods that sound really good to you most of the time, make a list. And any of them that you eat on a regular basis, you're going to check them off. And any of the ones that you typically restrict yourself from eating, we're going to circle. And we are going to work on the circled foods one at a time. This part can be really challenging, and if you need extra support through this, definitely find somebody that can help you through this.
I'll
But
ask.
yeah, call me. It's fine. Um, so pick one of the circled foods and give yourself permission to eat it. Whatever affirmation or reminder you want to use. I can eat this food. This food doesn't have power over me. Whatever it might be. And then go buy it at the grocery store or have it when you go out to eat, um, any which way. And while you're eating it, kind of check in with yourself. Like, does this taste as good as I thought? How am I feeling right now? Like mentally, physically, if it has bothered you in the past. Pay attention to your fullness. And also, like, really try to enjoy it if you do like it. Because the more we enjoy it, the more satisfaction we get from it, and that power definitely lessens too, like, it doesn't sound as appealing anymore, and we're gonna talk about that a lot more in one of the upcoming episodes too, but kinda like I said, just check in with yourself during the process, see how you're feeling about it, like, be kind of mindful and, I guess, non-judgmental with yourself.
Mm, yeah,
Just
yeah.
notice.
It's not gonna make or break your whole your whole your health, right?
Right. Right.
And you don't have to eat the whole thing either. You just if a couple bites is all you need and to be like and you decide, "Oh, this isn't as good as I thought or as I remembered it being or whatever," then stop eating it if it doesn't taste good, right?
Yep. And then after this eating experience, if you want to keep it on your list, as foods that appeal to you still, if you still like it, um, keep eating it on a regular basis, like plan it into your week. And that will help with that whole like, if I keep eating it, it will get less exciting to me.
Mm, yeah, the power it has over you gets less and less
Mhm.
because now you're like, "Oh, hey, chicken Alfredo, I see you. You're okay. I can have you once in a while."
Yep.
Right? Like, or however it is that you feel about it.
Yep.
Like,
Or chips that go stale because you ate some and then you didn't feel like eating the rest of the bag and you have to throw them out. Like,
yeah, that's a hard part though for some people, isn't it? Like
yep.
they feel like they're wasting food if you grew
Mm-hmm.
up in a house like all the starving children in
Yep.
Africa, or do you know how many kids would love to have this kind
Yeah.
when you grow up with that guilt where you have to eat all of the food.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about that. And
That's a whole other mindset.
yeah, so just stick with these couple things for now and stick with the podcast because we'll elaborate on some of it a little bit more too and kind of keep the process and the learning and the practice going and give you some more tips.
Yeah, awesome. Well, this is a great conversation. Where can they find
Yes,
us besides the
all,
podcast?
all over. So
All over.
in the show notes, we have links to our social media stuff. We have a private Facebook group. And we have our pod squad, which is really fun. We meet once a month and we basically just talk about the topics of the podcast more in depth, and people get to ask questions. And it's almost like small group coaching, I guess it ends up being a lot of the time. Um, It's a very small group.
It's
So
private. It's
yep,
private. It's not
yes.
recorded.
Mhm.
None of that.
Yep,
So
it's virtual.
what happens in the pod squad stays in the pod squad.
That's right. It doesn't get aired on the podcast or anything like that.
No.
Yeah. So you can find us in all those places.
Awesome. Great conversation, Miss
Yes.
Ashley. Thank you for taking the lead on that.
Yeah. Thank you for asking me lots of fun questions.
Anytime.
We'll chat with you next time.
Yes, ma'am. Love you, latte.
Love you, latte.